what I thought was, put together some of the things which are there in other countries, and try to look at how it looks like where we are. We are not very bad, and we are not very good as well. In some areas, we could be worse also. So let's go through this. I just tried to. There is a paper which is given in your folder also, which is try to look at all the regulations in different countries. We have tried our best to get as many of them as updated as possible. But some of them may be missing, and the whole idea is that we should try to look at other countries and learn from it. So I'll look at some background, significant legislation of coastal areas in other countries, right? Then some of the common global features. I have tried to look at in a table how this whole thing looks like, and what does it mean to us, and then maybe last point, which probably all of us have already spoken, right? It is it's very clear that most of the places people have sea routes, and travel has been the main thing, and for that everything else has come around that, and therefore development took place. And traditionally also they have looked at all the harbors, dredging, defense, fisheries, recreation, and there are regulations relating to that. Most of the countries do have something about it, and it has been seen that some of these regulations, I like today morning also we were looking at India. There are too many regulations, and we don't know what we are doing. If you look at some of the countries, they also are suffering from the same thing. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regulations from river, coast, creeks, beaches. They are there, but then they are trying to do some sense out of it in this case. Now let's look at when we compare some of these things. If you look at US, they have a Coastal Zone Management Act, which the first one, which came in 1972. Overall, it doesn't look like an imposition, but it is an encouragement to do certain kind of activity on the coast. There is no blanket legislation the way right now we have in our case. There are decentralization favored, so each state has its own way of looking at it. How do they look at their coast? Whether they want to look at it as tourists, fisheries, harbor, and then they work around that. And then a special attention to beaches and estuaries, because those are the places where they have a lot of economic activities. When we come to Canada, it is slightly on the environmentalist side here. Okay, so they have concept of marine protected areas, and some places where they are very precautionary, and precautionary to an extent that looks like they would not allow anything to happen. And wherever something goes wrong, they have a very high penalty. So Canada is in that situation. When we come to UK, in European Union, we have a clear hierarchy of law. They have multiple laws again, and then there are areas where they say that we should have marine protection zones, and they are really protected well. When we come to Denmark, they had a Planning Act in 1992, which has been revised in 2007. They also divide coastal zonation into rural, urban, and summer cottage, right? Now, in our case, the whole area of Goa and Ratnagiri and Mumbai and Chennai becomes different categories of places where the rules need to be looked at differently. They are talking about EI and public participation, similar to our case. Tourism and infrastructure is given importance. Very straightforward. In South Africa, the coast basically is considered national asset, and they have certain rights which they have worked it out. And they have fixed and arbitrary boundaries to be done away with. Some of the places they had arbitrary boundary, but now they have gone for fixed boundaries in most of the places. When we come to China, they have got this rule only in 2001, and where the marine function zoning is on the basis of geographical features and ecological concern. Again, from place to place, all of these have been done. Now, when we look at significant legislation of other places like Australia, you have 3 different parts. You have one in 1972, the other one got it in 1979, and Queensland got it in 1995. But if you look at overall the thing, they are looking at special station climate change related coastal issues has come in. That's the only country other than India probably which has talked about climate change related thing in coastal zone management. And they are talking about including air above the coastal areas also in terms of noise act. Noise and air act also becomes applicable in this area, which is again very unique. I don't know why they have done it and in which sensitivity. And in that they have included island the way we have also included island in CRZ 4. In New Zealand, there is again decentralization, and there is a clear hierarchy among the existing legislation. So you have a local town planning act, then you have regional, and then you have overall rules in place. So what are the global common features that we see from this? One is everybody talks about sustainable development, conservation, pollution control, what we all talk. Similar, absolutely no different. When we look at legislation, different countries do have different legislation, and I think the clear-cut thing comes out is they have a historical perception about their own coastal areas, and based on that some of these rules have actually got developed. So these are not like imported laws, not looked at and copied from somewhere or edited to some extent. They have been actually built upon what they were doing it earlier. I think the whole idea of fishermen rights here, Koliwada's right here, they become traditional in our sense when we are looking from that angle. And there is a whole lot of improved coordination among existing administrative bodies. The way we have this current rule of DCR not matching with town planning and town planning not matching with CRZ rules is not happening. Most of the countries have been able to align all of these together. What comes out very clearly is that fragile ecosystems are more or less spared in all countries. They have identified, they have demarcated and said it's almost like no-go zone, we will not do anything over there. And fixed shoreline boundaries are very rare. So that is another thing, except in one country, no one has tried to done a fixed line, 500 meters, 300, 400 meters. I didn't see in many places as it is. The other thing was most of the major role has been delegated to state level or the municipal authorities. It's not against central rule as we see it in most of the cases. The stress is on public participation. What is that public wants and how do they want to do it? And in all of these cases, coastal access is encouraged. And in current times, particularly in our case, we have been always trying to go into the coast and then cover as much as possible, including places like Goa also. So the whole idea, if you see the legislation very clearly, it says anything that you plan should not prevent any people and services to get hampered. Anyone can actually access whole of the coastal areas. And they include all the soil and seabed along with water quality maintenance, which is very important. Dumping into sea is highly and strictly regulated. And some of the other things, all of these are depending upon licensing, leasing and application. They have actual local regulation which are basically used for governing. So now when we look at our rules in terms of coastal protection and what is it the world is saying. So ownership of coastal property, if that is the item that we are looking at, it varies over the world and it is highly dependent on the legal history of the places. When we look at formation of coastal regulation zones, different regulations of different zones exist. Most countries are more or less in agreement with what we are saying. This is not much of different. Inclusion coastal water, most countries same. Safety according to delicate ecosystem, most countries more or less in agreement. Other activities is really not allowed. They have, these are the activities which are not allowed in this case. Fixed setback line, most countries almost unanimously disagree. It is not there except in one country. Hazard line with climate change in mind, surprisingly few countries have stressed on it but not regulated it. They have not said it very clearly on it. It's again something which is being discussed. Right now the way we are probably in the process of doing it. Let's see what happens. And the permission to conduct activity in the coastal zones, most countries have system of licensing that is subject to regular checks, probably similar to our case. And when it comes to penalization, more countries are strict with monetary fines, so there are very clear cut and very heavy penalty. And those places where they have defined the violations, they go by it. Hazard line with climate change in mind, very few countries, as I mentioned. Permission to conduct activity in coastal zone, they have licensing systems, they have regular checks and renewal systems. Penalization, I think it's just the repeat of it. And island has been excluded in most of the cases, but there are very few places where the islands are there. So there are few countries which regulate, which places they don't. So at the end, there are some thoughts which are similar to what we have been discussing here. What it looks like is, what comes out from it is that there is nothing which can be kept fixed. So it is very area specific, context specialist, and the social context becomes very important issue. And if we keep that in mind, some of our, the upgradation or updation of the CRZ rule that we are talking about will probably work better. So I'll stop here and we'll take question answer session. So,
see, coming back to that 500 crores, right? How do you really calculate that 500 crores for those 2-3 stilts that you really raise.
There are, see, there are 3-4 methods which are being prescribed very clearly in environmental economics. And we leave it to economics. I am not saying that we should become a, see, what is happening is,
See,
unfortunately,
the problem is where to draw the line. How much is enough? Like
That's what-
500 is okay,
No,
or,
no, no.
or it has to be 1,000.
Yes. No, I see one thing, I think, Rishi, I think my only point is, I don't want to discuss it specifically
No,
at
it's
this
okay.
point what it should be done. It is ultimately left to the developer how you would like to proceed on it.
No, I think
My-
there's the question being raised here is with regard, we are talking about this as a case in point, but at a level of abstraction.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
the question is, how does one evaluate environment?
Absolutely.
Because you can put project costs in terms of what?
Not the project cost. You see, there are methods, willingness to pay, for example. There is a methodology called willingness to pay. Go into that willingness to pay. Let's take a willingness to pay of the Mumbaikars for this particular mangroves. Go into that. Collect the information. Try to build it to the cost. Now what happens is, okay, if the developer has to extract that money for his own benefit. For example, he is investing certain money into that. He need to take it out from the some of the people who are going to occupy it. So obviously he will take it from them.
No, it's
Now,
not obvious,
See,
sorry.
no, no, let me just complete. Let me just complete. Now what I am saying is, you see, I am talking at a perspective of a developer. PPP mode. I am talking certain natural resource management in this country must move from the government owned management to PPP mode. This is what a presentation I have done in Planning Commission 2 years back and in World Bank. I said that why we are shy of going into PPP mode for the natural resource management, whether it is a mangrove, whether it is a coastal zone, whether it is a forest, whether it is a wildlife. What is wrong in it? The country's attitude today, our unfortunate part of MOEF looking at it is, we are a conservation ministry, we are not bothered about economics. This is not the statement
Uday,
of,
if I can point it out on the
I'm
same
sorry to
same
say
issue.
that we are not that way.
Yeah,
Pardon?
Arun.
Yeah.
The issue was which you asked
Yes.
is something which is doable, and even if we take direct cost,
Yes.
people can have a lot of big deterrents. So, for example, the oil spill which took place, we did a costing,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
including the mangrove damage. It comes to 524 crores.
correct,
Now somebody has to file case and recover that money. The moment that happens, oil spill thing will start looking
Automatically
more
it stops.
serious. Similarly, Mumbai Port Trust has a coal yard which destroyed 7 acres of mangrove. We did a calculation using the same principle what he is talking about. It comes to 171 crores.
yes.
Mumbai Port Trust must pay for it.
Correct.
It has damage.
That's fine, yeah.
The moment that direct cost also is communicated to people, they'll be willing to now preserve it. for whatever
Absolutely.
it is.
See, in fact, if you look at
Right
it
now,
last
there is no
week,
cost to it.
last week NGT has made a passing remark in one of the particular case. They said that the fine should be as high as 10 crores in this case.
Yes.
They made this statement during one of the case hearing in the NGT.
And what basis?
You see,
What
it's
basis?
arbitrary. I am not saying. What I am saying is, let's try to look at it, because I'll tell you, USA, you have no, if you look at in USA perspective, as you go closer to the coast, for any particular house also, you will have to pay huge insurance money. See, for example, your house is, let's say, about a kilometer from the coast. The insurance, what you will have to pay for a housing insurance is compulsory. There you will have to pay, let's say, about $1 lakh. And then, if you are going closer to 500 meters, it escalates. As you go closer and closer to the coast, it actually exponentially increases. It becomes so prohibitive to somebody to go and then live close to the coast. Now, why are we not looking at that option and trying to close our windows, saying that we are conservation? Let us identify. For example, I have a coral reefs in Andamans. Okay, I can't afford to lose coral reefs in Andamans. Okay, I agree. There are certain areas I preserve it as a treasures. Like I am saying, sacred groves. I was in Karnataka. Karnataka sacred groves is something spread across almost about 12,000 and odd sacred groves are all across the state. What may happen, the sacred groves will not be cut. We have unfortunately two views. Either I go to the left or I go to the right. I don't want that.
I understand your point. I understand what you mean, but I have a certain concerns. First of all, I doubt that you can translate everything into economic values. I just doubt, and there's no need to discuss this, but I can also prove it that certain things are not possible. On the other hand, there is ecosystem services. There are approaches translating natural resources into economic terms, following your line of argumentation. I give you an example: disaster management. In disaster management, you have to spend money for disasters not to occur, meaning you make an investment in order to save money and lives at a potential future you don't know, right? Now, in practice, as we can see every day on this planet, it turns out not to be so easy, because people tend, or decision makers, if they have the decision to spend their always limited budget to an investment where I have a point of return in the near future, or I spend money on disaster mitigation, on flood protection, or whatever it is, to a potential disaster not occurring, which I don't know when or what, which again you cannot quantify, because, I mean, okay, you can try and say this would save us, I don't know. But I think you understand the point I want to make. It's very difficult, and in practice you have many examples where you can see that it's actually failing. Now, one last comment to your. But anyway, I'm not. I understand you. You know, I'm just raising some concerns, and I like the way that you proposed something. You know, just not saying this is not good, but saying, well, why not trying this and that? And he proposed the second thing, insurance and so on, right? As an example. Now, there is also a concern. The insurance companies are making money, right? They do not avoid risks. They make money with risk transfer. No, you have to be very clear about that. If you give money to that, you know, you transfer the risk of being flooded to a financial risk of I'm not flooded, but I'm losing that money. Of course, it's not a risk avoidance strategy. It's just a risk transfer strategy. And with regard to nature, you cannot treat nature like social systems. You know, they're really different. And so these are just a few concerns regarding to this debate. Thank you.
What I feel sad about, if I may talk just a few words. See, I'm quite worried that when it comes to so-called development or money making, I think many knowledgeable people get into this thing what I call as some moral schizophrenia. You know, we know pretty much that environment is so very important. Why not we go around that nature and build our own systems? So
if you take up the airport example, Navi Mumbai,
Yeah.
then what do you have to say? I don't know.
it was unnecessary. I mean.
Because
My point, I have been mistaken. What I am just trying to say is there are a variety of options available. We have 7,500 kilometers of the coast. Now let's say, is that full coast is well developed? No. Hardly about, I think, 20 to 25% of the coast is well developed. Now let's identify the sacred groves in that. I am telling you, nobody will be foolish to sacrifice our Pichavaram mangroves. Nobody would like to.
No, I just wanted a qualification on well developed. When you say well developed, well destroyed or well developed?
I think well developed, I think our CRZ2, our ancestors of ministry have already written what is well development in CRZ2.
No, if you see history of tsunamis and this thing, you see wherever there is a soft wall or the mangrove protecting the coast, the least this damage is done to human being. And when there is no this thing, there is a maximum damage done. Yeah. So when there is a development, you say, yes.
See, in fact, if you look at the 2011 regulation, why the trade-off was done for Mumbai and then Goa and Kerala?
Why I think economics becomes an issue. I think a lot of people don't like it. Why economics becomes an issue is how do you communicate sometimes importance of a thing, right? Sometimes it becomes very difficult. You those who are ecologists, I have studied ecology till I didn't study, I didn't understand most of it. After passing out that exam of ecology, I understood the importance of it. Till I was studying, it wasn't very clear to me. Uh, what happens is, if you tell somebody that a tiger is very important to the ecosystem and therefore we should save it, it does not, ring a bell to a person staying in Delhi. Why tiger? Somebody Ranthambore, Tadoba. Why is that, right? Then you have to teach all that. So, when tiger is there, because of that, other animals also there. Grass remains, forest remains, rain comes, water comes, all that. If you say that one tiger, which is your national heritage, when it gets killed, when it is exported, people sell it, it is equivalent to almost like 80 lakhs rupees, which as a government you lose about 80 lakhs, or 1 million rupees. It rings little bit of bell. I will not say a complete bell. And it's not the real cost. It's just a small cost of smuggling of a tiger skin, everything. That's the cost. If we can communicate that part, we reach one level. Then we say second level. Okay, it does all that preservation and therefore forest preservation, the service level is this much. And that's how mangrove service level cost have been calculated. People have done it across world. So we can still do it, and that cost will at least ring a bell today to the people who are preserving or who are responsible for preserving mangroves anywhere in the country, how much money they should spend to do any security of these mangroves. And why Mumbai mangroves are being killed? Because government doesn't have security guard to preserve them. They say, how much should we do? The cost is too high. How much is the cost? 1 crore. Is that all these mangroves in Mumbai are worth only 1 crore? Even if I take direct services, it will be few thousand crores, right? And on that basis, direct services basis, I can tell government spend 5% of cost on the security aspect. So that communication becomes better when we do ecosystem services cost. I'm not saying we should actually cost it like that. And that's the argument which, whole of environmental economics moves around that.
What one would really look at it is, if it comes to public services, approaches, you would then actually soften it. All over the world it has happened. Now when it comes to the private services, there is going to be hardliners. It is well proven fact. No, it is not actually, but it is reverse. That's a different thing.
No, but there is one more approach, which is a voter-centric approach, where you have a population which is a voter for you at the time of election. So you allow them to destroy mangroves and have their hutments and regularize them by giving the ration card.
Heard concepts like polluter pays, and I think we all seem to embrace that idea. And who does this property belong to? Some individual ABC. All right. Now, on the one hand, we are fairly certain that the economic value of the environment that we are trying to protect, the mangrove, is significantly high. Then is the society willing to pay that annual cost to the person who has title to that land?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the point is something has to look at it very, very closely and with dedication and serious. Embrace this idea with as much sincerity as you are able to embrace the idea of protecting your environment. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if I do not get value for my property, because you are protecting rightly or wrongly a mangrove or a fish species or some bird that comes periodically, I think I need to get value for my... Anybody other than me is benefiting from it. Yes.
Sir, but there is another angle to it.
Fine.
I'm not talking about that specific plot, but there are similar plots in the similar location where the surrounding areas also were under mangroves, but the developer from that area, he went ahead with it illegally by giving money to the municipal
penalize him.
corporation.
I mean, he should also pay.
But what penalization you can do after 20 years? Because those plots also were developed when the CRZ was there.
I think there is one issue which we are not even debating and not even looking at those issues which are proven internationally. There have been many cases where the society has gone to the extent of undoing things which they had done wrongly. They have acquired many of the wetlands which were destroyed and they were taken over. All that has happened with the consent of the society. And nobody has put the value to it. The economic value is not important. I think there are issues where you might not be able to justify through the economic value. I don't really endorse to the opinion of putting an economic value and then saying that maybe today in that situation it might be viable today and it might not become viable tomorrow. So I think it has to be looked in isolation in terms of what is the environmental value it is serving, and from that angle, you will find that every intervention which you are doing in the name of development is intervention. It is having some impact. So you have to evaluate what is the cost of that impact, whether the society is willing to pay for that impact in the long term, and that is where the sustainability comes in.
I think that having heard all of these different perspectives, the conclusion that I've actually come to is there isn't, this isn't a conflict between development and the environment. I think that that's something that we need to understand first and foremost. And if anything, I would argue that it's environmental conservationists and the development lobby that's on the same side of this argument. And there is only one, group of people who are on the other side of the argument. And they aren't individuals, but they are a system. They are a system that prides bureaucracy and procedure over outcome. And I think examples like the example that you just shared, examples like the example that the gentleman at the end shared, of situations where policy implementation is completely erratic and inconsistent is the real enemy here. The enemy is neither the environment, it definitely isn't, nor development. The enemy is haphazard development occurring in an inconsistent way, with both the environment and the nation's economy being at risk. Thank you.
I just want to make one request, since I'll be leaving tonight. There can be a consortium developed out of this group, and that consortium can probably take an exercise of writing so-called ideal CRZ regulation, looking into all the regulations from 1991, and come out with a draft and show that this is the most ideal CRZ regulation that we can think of as an outcome of series of meetings, and put it for debate at any platform.